In the deepest reaches of space, beyond the furthest stars humans had ever charted, something vast stirred. It began with an anomaly, one too strange to be dismissed. The star system 103 light-years away, designated as Eridanus 22, had long been a subject of interest. The stellar scientists at the European Space Agency, ESA, and NASA had been observing it for years, cataloging data from distant telescopes, intrigued by its unusual energy fluctuations. Yet, none could explain the brief but sudden dimming of Eridanus 22's star, a flicker that lasted mere hours but carried with it a chill that sent a ripple through the scientific. Dr. Nadia Frost, a brilliant astrophysicist at NASA, was among the first to notice. Her team had been scanning for any oddities in distant solar systems, a routine task in the search for potential alien life. What Nadia found, however, was far beyond anything they had anticipated. The star was fading. No gradual dimming, no gradual burnout. It was as if something was eating it. A signal was sent out from the Hubble telescope, then from Kepler, and finally from the powerful James Webb Space Telescope. Each observation pointed to the same chilling reality. A vast, dark presence was moving through space, devouring the light of stars. And the most terrifying part? This was not the work of some cosmic phenomenon or natural disaster. This was something alive, and it was coming for us. Nadia's team worked around the clock, poring over data as they tried to make sense of the strange occurrence. They labeled it the Devourer. There were no precedents, no models in their databases. The Devourer wasn't a black hole. It wasn't a supernova. It wasn't even something they had a name for. But one thing was certain, it was advancing. Then, less than 2 months later, Eridanus 22 went dark. The light of the star vanished completely, snuffed out as if it had never existed. There was an uneasy pause in the room when the confirmation arrived. In that silence, Nadia realized the unthinkable. This wasn't a freak incident. It was a warning. The dark creature that had fed on Eridanus 22 was heading toward the next system. And they had just received its coordinates. A deep, foreboding sense of dread settled over her. It was no longer just an anomaly to be studied. It was a threat. As the news of the Eridanus 22 star's extinction reached Earth, panic spread like wildfire among scientists, governments, and the public. It wasn't just the loss of a star that alarmed them. It was the nature of the entity that had consumed it. Theories ranged from the catastrophic to the absurd. Some believed it to be a rogue black hole, though the speed at which it devoured its victim defied their understanding of physics. Others suggested a new kind of dark energy, something completely alien to anything humanity had ever encountered. Dr. Nadia Frost stood at the helm of the operation, but the weight of the situation was becoming heavier by the day. No one could explain the phenomenon, and even less could they understand what was causing it. But the one thing they all agreed on was this: the creature, whatever it was heading toward the solar system. Earth was in its path. The global scientific community scrambled to understand the nature of the Light Eater, as it was soon called by the media. Its behavior seemed to defy all known laws of nature. According to some preliminary models, it wasn't simply consuming the star's energy, it was absorbing the very light itself. As a result, any attempts to study the creature through light-based observation had failed. There were no physical remnants left behind, just a void. NASA formed a secret task force, codenamed Project Helios, to address the imminent threat. The group consisted of the brightest minds in physics, engineering, astronomy, and military strategy. It was clear that they couldn't approach this challenge in the conventional way. "We can't just wait for it to arrive and hope for the best," said Commander Julian Michaels, the head of the military division assigned to the task force. "We need to act now, before it reaches us." Nadia nodded, already deep in thought. She had been looking over star maps, searching for patterns, trying to predict where the Light Eater would strike next. It was a futile exercise, but she couldn't afford to waste a single moment. And then, as if on cue, the warning came. A second star had dimmed. This time, It was in the far-off system of Sagittarius A. A supergiant star, 10 times the size of Earth's sun, had simply faded from view. There was no explosion, no radiation burst, just darkness where light had once been. And then, just like Eridanus 22, the star disappeared without a trace. Panic gripped the scientific community. 2 stars had fallen. The Light Eater was moving quickly. If it followed the same trajectory, it would reach the outskirts of the solar system within a few months. "Prepare the ships," Julian ordered. "We need to make contact with the outer colonies and get them on alert. If it's already moving this fast, there's no time to waste." Nadia felt a coldness wash over her. It was becoming clear that the Light Eater wasn't just a force of nature, it was hunting. And it had a plan. They were no longer the observers. They were the prey. She turned to her team. "We need to find out what makes it tick. If it feeds on light, there has to be a way to stop it. We need a countermeasure, and fast." But the more they studied, the more it seemed that the Light Eater was unlike anything they had ever encountered in the universe. It didn't fit into any category. It was beyond comprehension. It was too powerful, too ancient, and it was heading straight for them. And then, Nadia made a discovery that froze her to the core. Hidden within the data from Eridanus 22, buried beneath the electromagnetic waves of the star's destruction, was a pattern. An anomaly, a signal, faint but unmistakable. The Light Eater wasn't just devouring the star, it was communicating. Nadia Frost stared at the data on her screen, her eyes narrowing as she processed the revelation. A signal? It didn't make sense. The Light Eater had been consuming entire stars, and now there was evidence that it was somehow communicating? She ran the anomaly through the algorithms again. The pattern was undeniably there. It wasn't random noise or a product of a malfunction. The data was coherent, rhythmic, even like some kind of deliberate transmission. But what was it saying? And who, or what, was it speaking to? Nadia's mind raced. She knew the implications were enormous. If the Light Eater was indeed capable of communication, it could mean one of 2 things. Either it was a higher form of life with advanced intelligence, or it was part of a much larger, more organized force, something far beyond their understanding. "Commander Michaels," Nadia said urgently, turning to the man who had been overseeing the military response, "we need to analyze this signal immediately. It could be the key to understanding the Light Eater's behavior." Michaels, though ever the skeptic, recognized the gravity of the situation. He signaled his team to get to work, pulling in specialists from both the communications division and military intelligence. Nadia, however, couldn't shake the feeling that the signal wasn't meant for them, not in any traditional sense. There was something inherently alien about it. For the next few days, Nadia and her team worked tirelessly, isolating the frequencies, decoding the strange sequence of pulses. The signal was faint but growing stronger, more defined with each passing hour. They were racing against time, trying to decipher a message that could hold the key to saving humanity. But the more they listened, the more she realized the truth. This wasn't just a signal. It was a pattern that spanned light years, an intergalactic rhythm that resonated with the very core of the cosmos. And then it hit her. The message wasn't just directed at Earth. It was a universal call to all living things in the path of the Light Eater. Nadia's pulse quickened. This was not a communication from the Light Eater itself. It was a signal from something else entirely, something that was connected to it, something that might have orchestrated this entire event. "We need to reach out," Nadia said, her voice shaking slightly with the realization of what was unfolding. "There's someone, or something, on the other side of this message. If the Light Eater is hunting, then maybe it's part of something even larger." But reaching out to the unknown was a dangerous gamble. The implications of answering a signal from a cosmic predator, something capable of consuming entire stars, could be catastrophic. But Nadia couldn't ignore the possibility that this was their only chance to understand the creature. They had to know who was sending the message and why. "We need to send a response," she said. "A counter signal. If we can get it right, maybe we can learn something more, something that can give us an advantage. Despite the risks, Julian Michaels agreed. They had no other choice. Earth's survival depended on finding the answer, and quickly. But as the team prepared their transmission, Nadia felt a strange sense of foreboding. What if they were wrong? What if the signal wasn't meant to be answered at all? Before she could voice her concerns, a new alert flashed across the screen. A third star had gone dark. This time, it was in the Cygnus constellation. A blue giant, far more distant than the others, had vanished. It was clear now that the Light Eater was no longer just a mysterious force. It was a deadly, predatory presence, moving steadily closer to the solar system. Nadia's heart skipped a beat. They were running out of time. We need to act now, she said urgently. Send the counter signal. The team scrambled to send the message, pouring all their computational power into crafting the perfect response. A signal encoded with a series of electromagnetic pulses that mimicked the Light Eater's transmission. It was their only shot at making contact with whatever intelligence was behind it. As the message was sent, Nadia couldn't help but wonder. Was this a plea for help, or a call to arms? Was the Light Eater part of something much more terrifying than they could ever imagine? And more importantly, would answering the signal be the key to their survival, or their doom? The response came sooner than anyone expected. Less than 24 hours after their transmission, the instruments aboard the observatories picked up something, an echo. A pattern so similar to the signal that it could have been a reflection, a direct answer. The moment the first wave of data hit, Nadia's heart skipped a beat. The transmission they had sent had been received, but the question that haunted her remained unanswered. What would happen now? Commander Julian Michaels stormed into the lab, his face a mask of both curiosity and tension. What do we have? Nadia turned toward him, her expression grave. We've made contact. At least, we think we have. The signal we sent. It's been mirrored back, but it's more intense than before. Almost like it's responding, adapting. Michael's brows furrowed. Adapting? She nodded. Yes, it's as though it's learning from our response. This isn't just a simple message. It's a form of communication we don't understand. Something's out there, pulling the strings. And it's not just a predator. It's orchestrating something far bigger. Her words hung heavy in the room as the team continued analyzing the signal. It wasn't just an echo. It was a refined version of their own transmission, with subtle alterations. The pattern was almost perfect. If it was an intelligence behind the signal, it was clearly aware of their existence, and it was testing them, learning about them. Nadia felt a chill run down her spine as she considered the implications. How long until it reaches us? Michaels asked, his voice low. Nadia consulted the data. At this rate, it could be within weeks. The Light Eater is moving fast, and its path seems to be converging toward us directly. Its hunger for energy is growing stronger. We need to prepare for its arrival. But, she trailed off, glancing at the newly decoded signal. There's something more to this. The signal. It's not just random. It's like a map, a trail leading somewhere. Michaels stepped closer, looking over her shoulder at the screen. A trail? Yes. Nadia pointed to a series of patterns that had emerged, like coordinates embedded in the pulse of the signal. It was as if something, was trying to guide them somewhere, perhaps toward the heart of the darkness that had already consumed 2 stars. It was as though the Light Eater wasn't acting alone. Someone, or something, was pulling the strings. This could be a trap, she said, voice trembling. The Light Eater is just the surface. There's something much deeper behind this. And we've just opened the door. Michaels was silent for a moment, weighing her words. Then we don't have a choice. We need to know who or what is behind this. If there's a chance we can stop it, we have to take it. Prepare the ships. We're going to follow that trail. The decision was made. There was no turning back. Within days, the task force launched an expedition to track the source of the signal. They outfitted a fleet of spacecraft, all designed for deep space exploration, with cutting-edge technology and weapons systems. But as they prepared to leave Earth's atmosphere, Nadia's mind was filled with questions. What were they walking into? Could they really stop this thing before it reached their home? Or were they already too late? The ships left Earth's orbit, heading into the unknown, following the coordinates embedded within the signal. The deeper they ventured into space, the more the fabric of reality seemed to warp around them. The stars they passed weren't just distant points of light. They seemed to flicker and distort, as if their very existence was being threatened by an unseen force. Nadia had seen cosmic phenomena before, but this felt different. It felt wrong. As they neared the coordinates, their instruments began to pick up a constant, low-frequency hum, like a deep, resonant vibration coming from somewhere ahead. The closer they got, the stronger the hum became. It felt almost alive. And then, just as they thought they were closing in on the source, something happened. All the lights aboard the lead ship flickered. The hum intensified, vibrating through the ship's very structure. An eerie, unsettling feeling settled over the crew. And then, it happened. The stars ahead of them began to fade. One by one, they blinked out of existence, as if some unseen hand was snuffing out their light. The sky ahead was transforming into an impenetrable black void, swallowing everything in its path. Nadia's heart pounded. It's here. It's closer than we thought. The message they had received was no longer just a map, it was a warning. The Light Eater had found them. And this time, it wasn't just devouring stars. It was coming for them. The blackness before them was suffocating. The stars, once shining beacons of light, had been devoured, leaving only an impenetrable void. The hum resonated louder now, almost like a pulse, vibrating through the very air and metal of their ships. It was no longer a distant echo. It was real, and it was close. Dr. Nadia Frost stood at the helm of the lead ship, her breath shallow, her mind racing. Increase speed, she barked to the crew. We need to get to the source of the signal before we lose any more time. Her voice betrayed none of the fear gnawing at her insides. But even she couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that this wasn't just an expedition anymore. It was a race for survival. Whatever lay ahead, whatever force had made the Light Eater, was pulling them in, drawing them closer to the center of the darkness. The fleet of ships, a mix of military and scientific craft, moved in a tight formation. Behind them, the remaining stars blinked out, one by one. It was as if the universe was quietly exhaling, its life force being stolen piece by piece. The hum intensified again, and a chill ran down Nadia's spine. Dr. Frost, came a voice over the comms. It was Commander Julian Michaels. We're not going to make it to the coordinates. The Light Eater, it's accelerating. Whatever this thing is, it's moving faster than we thought. If we don't do something now. Nadia cut him off, her eyes locked on the screen. We'll make it, she said firmly. Just keep the course steady. But even as she spoke, the dread continued to mount. They were nearing the epicenter of the black void, a place where not even the faintest light remained. The signal they had followed had become a beacon, leading them deeper into the heart of something monstrous. The Light Eater wasn't simply hunting, it was herding them into its grasp. Look, someone on the ship's communications team cried out. The signal, it's changing. Nadia turned toward the monitor. The data was no longer a simple series of pulses. The pattern had evolved into something more complex, more deliberate. It was almost like a conversation, but with no words, only frequencies. And then, a realization hit her. The Light Eater wasn't just consuming. It was organizing. It wasn't merely a force of nature, it was a machine. A predator programmed for one purpose: to feed, to extinguish stars, and to create a vast, dark network in its wake. And now, it was directing them toward something. Brace yourselves, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We're not just walking into its domain. We're walking into its lair. The fleet moved forward. The stars had long disappeared, leaving only the shadowy remnants of the void in their wake. Suddenly, the hum grew unbearably loud. The crew aboard each ship looked around at each other, unease spreading like wildfire. The silence between their words seemed to grow more profound with every passing moment. Then, a flash, a sudden burst of light, so intense that it seemed to consume the very fabric of space itself, illuminated their path. For a split second, everything around them seemed to blink back into existence. Distant stars, nebulae, galaxies, only to be swallowed by darkness once more. It was as if they had crossed through some kind of boundary, a threshold between two realities. Status report. Michaels's voice crackled over the comms. Powers fluctuating, came the reply from the engineering team. The closer we get to the signal's source, the worse it gets. We're losing energy at an alarming rate. Something is absorbing it. Something in the void. Before anyone could respond, the main display screen exploded with static, followed by a jarring silence. Then, slowly, a shape emerged from the void. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't even a traditional structure. It was something else. A vast, spherical mass of swirling blackness. It was surrounded by an immense halo of distortion. A gravitational anomaly so intense it bent light around it, creating an effect similar to that of a black hole. But this was no ordinary black hole. It was a singularity in motion, alive, breathing, pulsing. And then, as if in response to their arrival, the blackness began to shift. A massive wave of darkness expanded outward from the center, as though the entity at the heart of this place had noticed their presence and was preparing to feed. "Get us out of here!" Julian Michaels shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "It's a trap!" But it was too late. The ships trembled, as if the very fabric of space was beginning to unravel around them. A powerful force began to pull them toward the center, dragging them closer to the swirling black sphere. Nadia's stomach churned as she felt the immense pull of gravity. "No," she whispered, her voice a breathless plea. This can't be happening." The comms crackled once more, but this time, the voice that came through wasn't one of the crew. It was something else, a voice, hollow, echoing. The words were strange, impossible to comprehend, but they were unmistakable in their intent. "You are here. You are now part of the network. Welcome to the end." The fleet's ships groaned under the pressure, their hulls bending and warping as the force intensified. Nadia's heart raced as the final understanding began to sink in. The Light Eater was not just an entity. It was a harbinger of something much larger, and they had just flown into its jaws. The words echoed through Nadia's mind, reverberating with an unsettling finality. "You are now part of the network. Welcome to the end." The ships shuddered, their thrusters firing in vain as they tried to break free from the gravitational pull of the dark mass before them. It wasn't just a black hole. Nadia realized with growing horror that it was alive, an intelligence beyond anything they had imagined. It wasn't merely devouring light. It was consuming the very essence of existence, rewriting the laws of the universe around it. It was as if this dark being, this network, was the end of all things. "Commander, we're losing control," shouted the ship's lead pilot, his voice cracking under pressure. Nadia clutched the armrests of her seat, her knuckles white, as the view outside the cockpit seemed to warp and stretch under the immense force of the entity's pull. The stars around them were disappearing, not just fading but being swallowed by the dark mass, and with each passing second, they drew closer to the center of this unimaginable void. "Hold on, everyone," Julian Michaels shouted through the comms, his voice tinged with desperation. "We need to break free." Full reverse thrusters, but it was futile. The closer they got to the center, the more distorted their sensors became, the more the laws of physics seemed to bend and twist. The crew's communications were cutting in and out, static replacing their voices, the instruments failing one by one. Nadia looked at the screens. They were all failing. The gravity here was not just pulling them inward, it was unraveling everything they had ever known. Nadia had to make a decision, and fast. She turned to her team. "We need to understand it. We need to communicate, not just fight it," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos surrounding them. "The signal, it's a language. We've been looking at this all wrong. It's not about resisting, it's about adapting." It's trying to make us part of something bigger. The moment the words left her mouth, the air around them shimmered. The hum, once distant, now filled their entire ship, vibrating through their bones. Nadia felt a strange pull, almost magnetic, tugging at her consciousness. It was as if the entity was reaching out, trying to connect. Her mind blurred as strange images flickered in her vision: alien landscapes, endless fields of light and darkness, swirling tunnels, and flashes of stars being devoured. "Dr. Frost, what's happening?" Julian's voice broke through her daze. Nadia started, but her words faltered as the realization struck her like a jolt of electricity. "It's showing us something. The network. It's not just stars. It's everything: life, matter, energy. It's transforming the universe. This is its purpose. To reshape all of existence into one infinite network, a single consciousness. It doesn't destroy, it reconstructs." Her mind raced. Was that the goal of the Light Eater? Was this entity's hunger not just for survival, but for a universal transformation? And if so, what role did humanity play in that transformation? Before she could voice her thoughts, a sudden explosion of light erupted from the center of the dark mass. It was so intense that it blinded them, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. The light pulsed, rhythmic and controlled, each beat matching the strange signal they had been tracking for so long. And then, from the blackness, a form emerged. Not a ship, not a being, but something more, a shape that transcended any physical boundaries. It was a massive swirling mass of light and shadow, an alien intelligence manifesting itself in some incomprehensible form. Tendrils of darkness wrapped around it, and yet, through the void, its presence felt aware. Watching them, Nadia's breath caught in her throat. She realized with sickening clarity, the entity wasn't just a force of nature. It was an invader, an ancient intelligence that fed not only on stars but on the very fabric of existence itself. And now, it was offering them something. A connection. She felt it again, the pull. But this time, it was stronger, more insistent. "Dr. Frost." Julian's voice cut through her thoughts again, this time with an edge of urgency. "What do we do?" Nadia's hand hovered over the controls, torn between the instinct to fight and the growing realization that resistance might be futile. They couldn't stop the Light Eater. They couldn't outpace it. But what if? What if they didn't have to stop it? She inhaled sharply, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to send another signal. A response. But this time, we respond with understanding, not fear. We need to become part of its network." Julian stared at her, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "You're suggesting we join it? After everything we've seen, everything we've lost?" Nadia's mind churned with the implications of her own words. But deep down, she knew there was no other choice. They were already at the mercy of the Light Eater, and they had no way of fighting it. But perhaps there was a way to understand it, to survive by becoming part of its grand design. With trembling hands, she activated the ship's communications array. The signal they sent this time wasn't a mere message. It was emerging, a deep resonance that linked their minds with the incomprehensible intelligence of the entity. It wasn't just light, it wasn't just sound, it was a living, breathing presence, a consciousness that extended beyond the confines of space and time. And then, as if in response to their signal, the mass of light and shadow pulsed again, brighter than ever. The network seemed to open, expanding outward in all directions. For a moment, Nadia's vision blurred, her body filled with an overwhelming sensation, like the universe itself was folding in on her. She felt her mind stretch and bend as if it were being rewired. The Light Eater wasn't just consuming stars. It was consuming knowledge. It was gathering the entire history of the universe into itself. The stars flickered back into existence. The fleet's ships, once on the verge of collapse, now stabilized. For a brief, fleeting moment, Nadia wondered if they had made the right choice. And then, everything went still. "Is it over?" Julian asked, his voice small. Nadia didn't know how to answer. The entity was gone, and yet, she could still feel it, the presence. It was no longer a terrifying unknown. It was something else, something familiar. But as she looked at the stars now glowing brightly in the distance, she realized the truth. They hadn't stopped the Light Eater. They hadn't even resisted it. What they had done, what they had become, was part of something far larger than themselves. They had joined it. The universe was changing, and they had just become a part of that change. Nadia Frost awoke to an eerie silence. The ship's cabin was bathed in the soft glow of distant stars, their light now untainted by the vast darkness they had encountered. Yet, even though the ship was stable, the air felt thick, charged. It was as though every molecule around her had shifted, altered by the momentous event they had just experienced. She could still feel it. The connection, the presence of the Light Eater, no longer a monstrous entity but a vast, omnipresent consciousness, now intertwined with her own. It lingered in the back of her mind, a whisper that pulsed through the fabric of her thoughts. The crew, too, seemed to be affected. They moved silently, exchanging glances but saying little, each person undoubtedly coming to terms with the strange new reality they had just become part of. Nadia's mind was heavy with the knowledge that they had crossed a threshold. They had joined the Light Eater, become part of its network. The stars, those shimmering remnants of the universe's past, flickered back into view, brighter than before. Yet, there was something different about them. They weren't just distant points of light anymore. They felt connected, as though they were a part of something larger, something that stretched far beyond the confines of their own galaxy. Nadia sat at the bridge, staring at the screen, lost in thought. The Light Eater had reconstructed the universe, reordering it in its image. It wasn't just devouring energy. It was collecting it, gathering the very essence of existence, knowledge, history, time. And it had shown them the path to understanding. What had once been an existential threat was now something else entirely. It had a purpose, a reason for its existence. Its hunger wasn't just to consume, it was to transform. She felt Julian Michaels approach her, his face drawn with concern. "Nadia, we need to talk." She turned toward him, the words echoing in her mind. "You are now part of the network." "I know," she replied, her voice distant, almost hollow. "We're all part of it now." Michaels sat down beside her, his eyes scanning the stars outside. "We've been through hell, but I think the real question is, what now? What happens to Earth, to humanity? If this is what we've become, what do we do with it?" Nadia's mind raced as she sifted through the tangled threads of information, of connections. She had felt the network grow within her, a presence that was both alien and familiar. It was as if the collective intelligence of the universe was now aware of them, aware of their thoughts, their existence, their history. They were no longer just isolated beings on a small planet. They were part of something vast, something that spanned galaxies and stars, black holes and nebulae. The entire fabric of the universe had been rewritten. "We adapt," Nadia said, finally breaking the silence. "We become part of the network, not just as humans, but as something more. We evolve." "Evolve?" Michaels repeated, his voice skeptical. "By joining this thing? This entity that devours stars, that reshapes everything?" Nadia met his gaze. "Yes, but it's not as simple as that. The Light Eater isn't just a predator. It's an evolutionary force. It's not here to destroy, it's here to reconfigure. We've seen what it's capable of, what it's already done. The stars are still there, but they've been redefined. The energy is transformed into something new, something pure. We don't have to fight it, Julian. We become it." Michael stared at her, his eyes narrowing. "And what does that mean for Earth? For humanity?" Nadia sighed, leaning back in her chair. The weight of the question was immense. What did this new reality mean? They weren't just survivors now. They were part of a greater cosmic order, a new collective intelligence that transcended individual life, individual planets, individual histories. Earth was no longer the center of the universe, but it had been given a chance to join the universe in a way no one had ever imagined. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I think it's the only way forward. The Light Eater's network is growing, expanding, and we're part of it now. Earth can join, or it can resist. But I don't think it has much of a choice. If humanity is going to survive in this new universe, we'll have to evolve with it." There was a long silence between them as Michaels absorbed her words. Then, he nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the stars outside the ship's viewports. "I never imagined it would come to this," he said quietly. "But if this is our future, if this is the only way to survive, then we'll have to make it work." Nadia watched as the vast network of stars stretched out before them, now linked together in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The energy, the knowledge, the very fabric of existence, all of it was being transformed into something new, something that connected everything. Every star, every galaxy, every living being was part of it now. And yet, in the back of her mind, she felt a flicker of doubt. Was it too late to change the course of the Light Eater? Had they already lost their individual identities to the collective consciousness? And if Earth joined the network, would it retain its autonomy? Or would it become another cog in a vast, cosmic machine? As the ship continued its journey through the stars, Nadia felt herself torn between two realities. The promise of evolution, of transcendence, was tantalizing. But the cost was immense. There was no going back now. They had crossed the threshold. The universe had been rewritten. And they had become part of that rewrite. The universe was no longer what it had been. The Light Eater, once feared as a devouring force, had revealed itself not just as a predator, but as an agent of change, of transformation. The network it created stretched across the cosmos, an interconnected web of stars, energy, and consciousness. The remnants of humanity, now forever entwined with it, felt the vast pulse of this new reality in their very bones. It was a strange, uncomfortable fusion, like waking up from a dream and realizing the world around you has changed completely. Nadia Frost had been the first to truly understand the shift, but now, in the days and weeks that followed, she found herself lost in a sea of voices. It wasn't just the crew of the expedition or the surviving leaders of Earth's governments, there were others. Others beyond their understanding. The network was alive, and it was growing. She walked the quiet corridors of the ship, her steps barely making a sound on the metal floor. The weight of the change was everywhere, pressing down on her, an unspoken force that had altered the very nature of existence. Earth still spun in its orbit, still held the same blue and green beauty, but it no longer felt like home. The others had adapted faster than she had anticipated. Humanity, like the stars, had been remade into something new. Ideas flowed between them now, unspoken thoughts and dreams, all moving with the rhythm of the network. They were no longer isolated minds, but parts of a collective consciousness, a vast and interconnected whole. But for Nadia, it was harder. She could still feel the boundaries of her individual self, like a thread that hadn't fully been woven into the tapestry. "Dr. Frost," a voice called from behind her, breaking her reverie. It was Julian Michaels, looking more tired than ever. His eyes had lost some of their sharpness, his movements more fluid, less deliberate. He was adapting, as everyone else was, but there was something in his gaze, a quiet understanding that the world they knew was gone. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice soft. Nadia smiled faintly, though her heart was heavy. "I'm adjusting," she said. "It's strange, Julian. It feels like we've become part of something greater, but at the same time, something's slipping away. The more I understand the network, the more I feel like I'm losing myself." Michaels nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. "I understand. It's like we're becoming something new, but we don't know what that something is. We used to define ourselves by our individuality, but now, it's like we're part of a consciousness that stretches far beyond Earth, beyond our understanding." "Exactly," Nadia whispered. "We've become part of it. This intelligence. It's not evil, it's not malicious. But it's all-encompassing. We're all one now. And I don't know if humanity's ready for that." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe we don't need to be ready. Maybe it's not about survival anymore. Maybe it's about evolving, about embracing this change." Nadia closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. There was truth to what he said. Evolution, after all, was a process of becoming something new. The universe had been remade, its very fabric restructured by the Light Eaters network, and now they, too, had to evolve, whether they were ready or not. A voice interrupted their conversation, crackling through the comms. It was one of the fleet's commanders, a voice filled with urgency. "Dr. Frost, Michaels, we have something you need to see. The network, it's beginning to awaken on a larger scale. It's spreading faster than we expected." Julian's face hardened. "What does that mean?" "It means," the commander's voice trembled, "the stars we thought we had saved, they're changing. More than that, we are changing. This isn't just a cosmic event anymore. It's the beginning of something different." Nadia's heart skipped a beat. The Light Eater had been a force of nature, but if what the commander was saying was true, if the network was expanding faster than they had realized, it meant that they were no longer mere participants in a cosmic shift. They were becoming the architects of something far grander, far more mysterious. Nadia's mind raced. The very essence of the universe, the fundamental forces of nature, were being rewritten in real time. The stars, once the beacons of light in the darkness of space, were now part of an intricate web, their energy, their mass, their very being contributing to the network. Earth, humanity, the Light Eater, they were all converging, merging into a singularity of purpose. "We need to act fast," she said to Julian, her voice firm, though inside, she felt like she was standing on the edge of an abyss. "This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about what we're becoming. We need to understand the network fully, or we'll lose ourselves in it entirely." Julian nodded. "Then we keep moving forward. We adapt. We understand. We become." The universe was no longer a cold, distant void, it was alive. And now, they were part of it. Nadia could feel the pull, deep in her chest. They were no longer just human beings clinging to their place in the cosmos. They were becoming something else, something greater. But at what cost? And as the network continued to expand, as the stars continued to pulse with an unfamiliar rhythm, Nadia couldn't shake the question that had haunted her since the beginning. Was this the end, or the beginning of something even more terrifying? The answer lay just beyond their grasp. But they were no longer afraid.